Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webcast, Building an IT Roadmap to Support Your Enterprise Mobile Strategy. My name is Eric Carlson. I'm a partner at Propelix, and I'll be your host for today's call. I know we've said this on previous calls as well, but today is our largest webinar to date, and it's also great to see some of our clients on this call. So welcome, Scott, Russ, Mike, and Jeremy. Welcome, and glad to have you guys here. A few housekeeping items before we begin. Please ask questions using the QA function within WebEx. We'll leave plenty of time at the end for questions, including many of the ones that came in submitted before this call on the sign-up form. And as always, this webinar is being recorded, and the recording of this call as well as the slides will be made available later today for you guys to be able to download. Before I turn over the webinar to Adam and Michael, I want to give you a brief background on Propelix as well as Appcelerator. Propelix creates mobile strategies and world-class apps for the enterprise. We are 100% focused on mobile for the enterprise, not only customer-facing, but more importantly, we feel on some of the higher value use cases for internal employees, for partners, for distributors, etc. We have a 15-year track record of providing enterprise-level strategy to Fortune 500 clients, helping large organizations build business strategies using technology, but also specifically in taking advantages of disruptive technologies like mobile. For the last 6 years, we've been exclusively working within mobile. We're based in San Jose with consultants across North America, but many of our clients and many of our engagements include a global reach. Briefly on what we do for our clients, we have 3 categories of services. Primarily, we provide mobile strategy services that are delivered in fast-paced workshop types engagements as quickly as a single week. We build our services and our Kickstart projects around specific challenges we see repeatedly in discussion with our prospects and our clients. Similar to some of the ones listed here, such as mobile app portfolio creation, being able to scope and plan a single mobile app idea, helping discuss and build an IT readiness plan for mobile, the topic of this webinar, as well as some structures around BYOD and MDM, and a lot of areas within visualization and prototyping. We also offer mobile advisory services. These are structured as block-of-hour types of engagements, allowing your organization to use our people, tools, and processes in more of an ad hoc mode, away from high-energy workshops. We also do a lot of speaking engagements, assisting with vendor evaluations with RFP processes, helping define and implement policy, mobile center of excellence creation and governance, etc. And finally, we tie all this back to mobile application development, where we focus heavily on great user experience and application simplicity up front and quality, reusable, portable code on the back end. A couple words about Appcelerator, our partner, and also on this webinar. Appcelerator started with the idea that mobile will impact our lives even more than the web. It's a privately held venture-backed startup with over $50 million in investment from the top-tier institutional and strategic investors. And as of June of this year, Appcelerator has nearly 150 employees. They're headquartered in Mountain View, California, with offices in San Francisco, the United Kingdom, and Beijing, China. Mobile apps follow a different delivery lifecycle from the one most of us grew up with. They run on a much wider range of devices and operating systems, and they're enhanced on a more frequent basis, and user expectations for usability and performance are sky high. To get it right, a company needs to understand when, where, and how its apps are being used and on what types of devices. The Appcelerator platform covers this new mobile lifecycle from end to end, from the initial design and prototyping through development and testing, and onto the analytics needed to understand the user's experience. There are over 475,000 registered developers, and these developers have launched over 56,000 applications on Appcelerator solutions, including world-class brands like NBC Universal, Zipcar, Legoland, eBay, Medtronic, and Michael. Before I turn over, I want to introduce both of our presenters today. The first presenter is Adam Bookman, a partner at Propelix. Adam has been brains behind many mobile product and program launches. He has advised companies on mobile strategies for business as well as in IT. He continues to be a trusted advisor to some of the world's leading brands, and Adam is a frequent speaker at conferences related to mobile. And we're very happy to have, as a special guest, Michael King from Appcelerator. Mike is Appcelerator's principal mobile strategist, where he directs the company's product strategy, provides strategic sales support, partner enablement, market research analysis, and product evangelism. Mike has spent the last 11 years at Gartner, most recently as a research director, where he managed all US-based wireless data research, specializing in mobile enterprise strategy. For today's agenda, I'm going to turn it over to Michael. He's going to talk a little bit around enterprise mobile trends and IT challenges. And Adam's going to spend some time talking around some essential considerations we feel are important for building an IT roadmap to support your enterprise mobile strategy, talk a little bit around approach and frameworks, walk through a few examples, and like I said, leave plenty of time for questions at the end. We had a lot of feedback coming in from this webinar, and I'm sure we're going to miss some of those points. So if we missed your topic and you want to be able to talk more about that, please use this URL, propelix.com/letstalk, and we'll set up a private get-together with the members on this webinar, and we'll go from there. So with that, Michael, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. And I am going to talk for a little while today about some of the trends that we're seeing. And what I've done here is I've actually pulled data from a number of surveys. Now, one of the nice things about being in the position that we're in with the sheer volume of applications, we're the largest of the application platforms in the enterprise, is we get to see a lot, and we get to talk to a lot of developers and a lot of enterprises about what they're doing in mobility. So quarterly, we do a survey. We actually do 2 developer surveys and 2 enterprise surveys every year. And on the last developer survey, we chatted with about 6,000 mobile application developers. Actually, it was 6,050 mobile application developers. And we asked them a lot of questions about what they're seeing in mobility and how that's evolving for them. And one of the really interesting things that we saw is that, you know, the number of developers that are building B2C and B2C apps is actually going down, and the number of folks that are building B2E and B2B apps is increasing dramatically, from 30% a couple years back to right around 50%. And this is what we saw in the early days of the web, right? First you would do your customer-facing website, and then you would build out your internal-facing website and web resources. But it's happening much faster. And we think we're sort of at the precipice of this tipping point, where an enterprise may have 1 or 2 customer-facing apps, depending on how many brands they support, but they may have as many as 100 internal apps for everything from Salesforce enablement to dispatch and routing to expense management to just knowing what's on the menu at the cafeteria. And the idea, unlike the web, where you're going to have one sort of master intranet or master application that delivers all the information you're going to need, mobile apps tend to be very focused. And so you're going to have this massive audience of applications and this massive number of applications. Now, what's also interesting about that is if you look at, if you look at the, there we go, sorry. If you look at the focus around enterprise app stores, you know, building applications that will go into these enterprise app stores. Now, for folks that are not super familiar with enterprise app stores, it's a methodology that an enterprise can use to securely distribute and enhance mobile applications for the use of their employees. A lot of the mobile device management and mobile application management vendors offer this capability. Really interesting, though. I mean, Q4 of last year, 38% of folks thought that they were going to build applications that were meant to go into enterprise app stores. Now that number is more like 51%. So it really does show the rapid shift away from away from business to consumer or games or other apps like that, really focusing on those internal app stores that will be built. Now, we also do an enterprise survey where we talk to a number of our enterprise customers, and we talk to them about sort of the same sorts of things, what platforms they're building for, what trends do they see, what are their expectations for the next year. But the questions tend to be much more focused on what they see in the enterprise. Now, we have well over 1,400 enterprise customers that are building applications, so it does give us a pretty wide disbursement and a pretty deep view into what folks are doing. So the first question was, okay, what are you connecting to, right? What sorts of data are you mobilizing today, right? And a lot of enterprise content management, a lot of Microsoft databases, a lot of Oracle, a lot of SharePoint, SAP, Salesforce. It's it's a pretty even mix as you get to all these different back-end data systems with nothing over 50%, which tells us that like we're seeing in many of our customer bases, a mobile application will oftentimes bring together data from a number of disparate back-end systems. And so you've got to have the ability to, A, connect to those systems, B, orchestrate that data, and in many cases use a cloud third tier to sort of do all that orchestration and coordination and everything else like that. It also shows that, you know, once you've made that connection to the back-end data source, that the utilization of it on a mobile device isn't necessarily one-to-one. So you may have 4 apps that access SAP data about your inventory, but you may have 10 that access customer data. And so that mix means that the folks that are just trying to take a mobilization of Salesforce or an SAP or anything else like that aren't going to be able to answer all the needs they have for all of the mobile applications they're going to have to build. And as we look across enterprises, sort of from the dawn of time, I don't know that I've ever spoken to an enterprise that has a completely homogeneous back-end data source. So in other words, I'm only SAP, and that's the only thing I'm ever going to use. It just doesn't happen. Another question we asked is okay, what about leadership? How are you guys preparing for this onslaught of mobile applications? And, you know, obviously, there's purview over all these back-end data sources. Obviously, you're building a ton of applications. From a motivation standpoint, you know, depending if you talk to Gartner or Forrester, it is either number 1 or number 2 of the CIO's top priorities for 2013 and for 2012. You know, it has been of the top 3 priorities for CIOs for the past 5 years, but interestingly enough, very few companies are planning to hire leadership, right? So if we look across the board, 95% of them aren't hiring chief mobility officers, 93% of them are not hiring VPs of mobility, heck, 83% of them aren't even hiring directors of mobile apps, and 79 not even mobile managers. If you're not hiring the leadership, if you're not putting the folks in place to execute on this plan, it's really, really hard to see the benefits from mobility. Secondly, when we talk about mobile centers of excellence, and I know Adam's going to chat a bit about mobile centers of excellence later on in the presentation, but you know, we talk to folks about, okay, when are you going to establish an MCOE, or have you already? And 21% of them say, yeah, we're going to get to it, but we don't really know when. But fully 60% of them have no plans to establish a mobile center of excellence, and this really leaves us scratching our heads. You know, there's a disconnect, right? It's very important. It's number 1 or number 2 on the CIO's. We understand the value. We've seen guys like Zipcar, which have built entire businesses around mobile apps. We see folks like Safeguard Properties who have seen, you know, well over 200% growth over 2 years, based fully on a mobile application they've built. But at the same time, we're not going to hire people for it, and we're not going to put the right organizational constructs in place to service that. I think there's a real disconnect there somewhere. So if I look at what are some of the obstacles to success, right? So first off, what technologies are you investing in, right? And I look across the board at all of these technology investments, from mobile app stores to mobile devices to MDM to testing platforms. There's a fair amount of companies who have already purchased MDM, MAM, or enterprise app stores, and that's usually the first step along this process. Is okay, great. I may be building apps, but first let's get the infrastructure in place I need to distribute the applications and secure the devices. And with BYOD, maybe it's just secure the applications and the data, all depending upon that. So that's step alpha. Now, secondly, you're going to see is, okay, how do I build the apps? How do I test them? How do I get those apps out to my employees? And those are really the next steps. But if you look at it, a lot of folks are saying, well, testing really doesn't fall on my radar, and mobile app development platforms, we plan to purchase, but, you know, maybe it's somewhere down the line. And some folks are saying, you know, we don't even plan to purchase these things. And again, this is sort of the big disconnect, right? Without a centralized methodology for building the apps, for testing the apps, for distributing the applications, it's very difficult to execute on the security and the governance and all the other pieces that you're going to need. Now, there are some pretty big issues that, some pretty big challenges that arise when you don't have centralized authority, you don't have centralized governance, you don't have centralized methodologies for building, distributing, delivering, testing these applications. And number one is inconsistent application quality. Now, the pushback that I always hear is, well, it's an internal-facing app. They have to use it. Actually, that's not the case. If you build a lousy expense management application, I can go to the iTunes or Google Play and I can download one of 30 different expense management applications or travel management applications and somehow through a common delineated format or some other format, drop that information into the systems of record. Okay, there's some security issues and some management issues there, and moreover, that's kind of a waste of your time if they're not using the application. So first and foremost, take the lessons you learned from your consumer-facing application of strong UI and definitive, easy-to-use menus and things like that, and apply those same lessons to your employee apps. BYOD eventually means BYOA, bring your own app. Secondly, lack of collaboration across multiple projects. If you're not having a centralized methodology or a centralized framework for delivering these applications, then you're rebuilding things like VPN invocations or login scripts or company logos every single time you build an application. That is not a sustainable process. Reusability is extremely limited at that point in time, and limited sharing of lessons across projects. So in other words, when a developer figures out the best way that you can expose a piece of SAP data, great. The next application that's built by a different group cannot share in that learning. Delivery schedules are wildly divergent. We see this even with huge companies with literally buildings full of mobile developers. If you take Facebook, for example, the delivery of their iOS application occurred, and then literally 6 months later, the Android application was delivered. And they have an entire building of mobile developers. And so these, again, a centralized framework gives you the ability to deliver all of the right platforms simultaneously. Lack of analytics, I think, is the biggest issue, though, because if you look at sort of one of the drivers of mobile first is you get an application out there. You begin to analyze how people are using it. You begin to analyze how folks in the field are actually utilizing the information, and you iterate. And you make changes to the application so it runs better, or you make changes to the application so it doesn't crash. But you get something out there and you iterate. And without analytics, understanding how people are using it, you cannot do that. At least from a data-driven standpoint, you're kind of guessing at that point in time. And we've been talking about, well, reimagining IT for probably better than a decade, but this is really a tipping point for IT because, you look at it and IT with BYOD is no longer providing devices. With cloud services, in many cases, they're not running data centers or they're not running as many data centers or servers or infrastructure as they used to. And if they're not building applications and providing an environment for the enterprise to innovate with, what is it that IT is doing, really? IT has really got to transform from this governance and enforcement entity to one of enablement, where they can provide sandboxes for the business to experiment and to innovate and to drive really mobile-first activities. So you can enable with technologies, frameworks, security frameworks, application frameworks, widgets, approved things like that. Enable with education, become the masters of the art of the possible for mobile applications, and really start to deliver on sort of the promise of IT, thereby enabling the business to innovate. With that, I'm going to hand off to Adam to talk a little bit about how IT can build that roadmap to support mobile and go from there. Adam, are you there?
I am here. Hello. I'm sorry.
Perfect.
So
no
thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Mike. So what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to build off of those challenges that you discussed, and then your last slide on how IT needs to become enabled. That's really the crux of this, of how does IT build a roadmap to support mobile based on needs of the business and not just the perceptions of what they think the business needs. And there's a little difference there. When we speak to IT folks, there are just a tremendous number of questions that people have. And we're just so early on in mobile that these questions are natural and they're great questions. Some of them are business side questions around, do we know what the needs are of the business? Do we understand what the business wants? What is our mobile strategy? What apps are we going to be building? But then how are we going to create those apps? What devices do we need to support? What competencies do we need from a skills perspective? What processes do we have to change and put in place? And what tools do we need? A lot of these questions, if you try to answer them in a vacuum without really speaking to business and understanding what the strategy is, you can get yourself down a really kind of deep rat hole where you're going off and answering questions that might not be exactly relevant to your overall strategy. So what I thought we would do today is talk about 5 considerations for IT folks when you're trying to define a roadmap to support your enterprise mobile strategy. The first consideration that I want to discuss is to start whatever you're doing from an IT perspective by understanding the business demand. And we see that this doesn't happen as much as it should, but it really is absolutely critical to not build an IT roadmap in a vacuum, but instead to speak with the business, to reach out to the business and understand the mobile scenarios that they're looking towards, and start to prioritize those mobile scenarios to inform your IT strategy. And the business scenarios, we need to look beyond just B2C apps. And like Michael was mentioning, for the past couple of years, there's a big, strong focus on B2C apps, and now it's shifting over to business to employee to consumer, to apps for employees, apps for the business. We think it's important to look at app ideas in each of these channels, and with the business, prioritize the use cases based on business drivers so you can start to develop a roadmap and understand your posture for mobile innovation over the next year or next 2 years, whatever you set the bar at. Understanding the business demands will then help you address the technology implications across the people components, process, and technology components. So once you know the demand, the next question is, how ready are you to support that demand? And in order to find this out, we recommend going through each aspect of IT as it relates to mobile. This is a classic maturity type model, and some of the areas that we're looking at are core areas to the enterprise, but they might need a little bit of a tweak to be able to support mobile. They don't necessarily need a full new organization to be created. You want to look at areas from your mobile strategy to, how ready are you from an enterprise information management perspective to access the data that's needed to achieve the use cases of the business came up? What are your integration capabilities and how ready are those integrations for mobile over the air? What policies do you need to put in place and how are you going to govern those policies and how ready are you for that? What controls need to be put in place from a network and security perspective? What tools do you need to look at or do you have already from an MDM or a mobile application development platform, and what skills do you need to support those? Once we have devices out there, how are we going to control and manage expenses? Is that something that we're looking to support? And then what gaps exist in the application delivery and development and the ongoing support of your mobile applications? So we suggest measuring each of these categories in a maturity model and then using that to create a mobility report card. And the mobility report card, this is just an example of a mobility report card, but it takes each of the categories, and we think it's really important to deep dive into the categories so you can break down the components and come up with actionable steps and really look at what are your gaps. So what we're trying to do here is not to ding IT and say, IT is ready or not ready for mobile. We're really focused on the gaps and understanding where we need to be based on business demand to achieve the foundation for our IT strategy to support mobile. What vulnerabilities and risks do we have that need to be addressed? what compliance concerns might be out there, and where are we lacking capabilities that we have to go to the market, whether it's in a people from a personnel or from a technology perspective. And this helps establish, where we need to go. Something that's on the top of mind in our third consideration here is understanding the risk components, and this is at the top of mind of IT folks all over, and we recommend that it's very important to establish a risk profile. And a starting point for establishing a risk profile is to take the use cases that you identified in that first step that we were talking about and look at, for each use case, what data and assets will be accessed as part of the delivery of that scenario. And so that relates to our risk in terms of type of data that we're exposing. Are we exposing like sales brochures? Are we exposing critical patient information? And where are we on the scale there? Then what we want to do is look at the impact of the exposure from a risk perspective. So if that information got out to the public, what would happen? Would it just be, a sales brochure got out and we're all okay? Or does it have larger legal ramifications, financial ramifications? Could this affect our stock price if this type of information went out? Based on, for the higher risk areas, we clearly will need better controls over the data. And that doing the scoring there between understanding the use cases and looking at business value and your risk, you're able to classify your use cases. And we use a classic model here of trusted, semi-trusted, restricted, and untrusted. And just to walk through it for a couple seconds, trusted use cases are those that are high risk but have high business value. So it probably does make sense to deliver them, but the policies and controls that you need to put in place need to be really well thought out, both from the types of devices that you allow the data on, but also how that data gets back and forth and how the information is accessed. Semi-trusted are scenarios like the sales scenario that I mentioned that have high business value but probably a lower degree of risk. And these are areas that we see that companies, these are quick wins for companies to get going on mobile from policy perspective. Restricted, those are areas where high risk, low value, probably not a good scenario at all for mobile. And untrusted, those are use cases, for instance, where your customers are accessing your servers through open channels, probably things you have in place already. The risk matrix, though, is a critical component. Something that we see our clients doing and some of the prospects we talk to is classifying all assets at the same degree of risk. So they're saying everything is high risk. One example is we're working with a pharmaceutical company and they have around 1,000 salespeople. They gave every one of the salespeople iPads, but they, from a risk classification perspective, said everything is very high risk, so you can't access anything in our corporate environment. You can't access any of your sales collateral. And this had a negative impact on risk because the salespeople found workarounds. They would email from their corporate emails to their personal emails, the things that they needed, their presentations and collateral, and then display them on their iPads when they're in front of clients. So we want to make sure that those workarounds aren't happening, and we really, if we take a good look at our risk, we'll be able to understand what we can easily deliver. The fourth consideration is critical, and this goes back to Michael's Mobile Center of Excellence slide and the importance of a Mobile Center of Excellence. Whether you call it an MCOE or not ready for an MCOE, the idea is that it's critical to define repeatable mobile standards. The way that we see a lot of our clients beginning with addressing their roadmap for mobile is to start with an MDM vendor and to standardize on a tool, which in itself isn't a bad idea. I mean, to have a way to manage your devices, and those tools are now extending into mobile application management. That's very important. But really, this doesn't sum up your strategy and the standards that you need. This is just one piece of your strategy. It needs to, your MDM solution needs to be related back to your risk categorization. You still need a very strong policy focus, and you need to come up with those policies and communicate those policies back to the business and to your partners. But you don't only need standards on the infrastructure side related to device management and when BYOD is allowed and when it's not and what devices you're going to support and which ones you're not. You also need standards on the application development side of the house for your SDLC, your architecture standards. You need branding standards. You need standards around decisioning for when to build a mobile web app and when to build a native app. You need standards around technologies like when to use a cross-platform development tool like Appcelerator and when not to. So there's a lot of standards that come into play, and there's a lot of newness when it comes to mobile that organizations aren't typically ready for. And what we see happening, especially in our large clients, is that these decisions are being made over and over again at the business unit level. One example is with the apps versus web discussion. Every time there's an idea at one of our large retail customers for about a year, every time in each different business unit someone had an idea, they would go through the pros and cons of building a mobile web app versus a native app. And what we did eventually was we came up with, from IT, a centralized perspective on apps versus web, and then we communicated that out so that decision doesn't have to be relitigated. It's important to not only have the standards, but also have a communication mechanism so folks know that these standards are in place. And that's one of the big areas that if you have it, it doesn't mean that people are going to know that you've come up with these standards. So having a communication and education mechanism is very important. Both to the business and to your external vendors. Not all IT groups are going forward and building all mobile apps and doing all mobile app development internally. They're often farming that out to many different vendors. And here it's really important that when you're doing that you set the standard centrally so all the vendors know what your standards are so they follow it. It has been the case we've seen over and over again that that a business or IT group will contract with different IT vendors to build mobile apps, and they'll be architected very, very differently, maybe with different tools, different frameworks, different web services. So really make it as repeatable as possible and ensure that there's some governance around it. And one good way to do that is through the creation of a mobile center of excellence. The final consideration I want to speak about today is defining an action plan that measures your impact in weeks and not months. And, it's great to understand the business demand and then look at the maturity, but what we really need to do is turn the gaps that we've considered and the standards that we now know that we need to create into a plan, because it can't all be done at once. You don't have the resources for that, most likely. There has to be some semblance of a prioritized action plan to move forward. And what we recommend doing is taking the categories in the maturity model and the gaps that you've identified in the mobile maturity matrix and align that in an IT strategy roadmap. And what's important here are the rows in the roadmap, and the rows relate back to the maturity categories. And the cells are the specific tactics that are necessary to achieve your overall strategy. And they're tactics in biteable chunks that are, some tactics focus on strategy, some focus on governance, security, application development. They could be as small as, let's do a vendor evaluation for a mobile application development platform. It could be, let's come up with a way to classify new mobile ideas and prioritize new mobile ideas. It could be, let's set the framework for a mobile center of excellence. So the idea here is to identify the tactics to achieve your strategy and make sure that they're small enough that they're in actionable steps, and prioritize them. Prioritize each tactic based on value to the business, how ready you are as an organization to do that tactic, and how much it costs. And we're looking for quick wins that have high business value that we're really ready for and don't cost too much, and those become our quick wins. There are also going to be some foundational elements that are going to be critically important for you to set the groundwork for, to lay the groundwork for up front, those might not be, low cost, but they're necessary for your program. And the idea here is to have on one roadmap identifying, all the group's needs. So this is really a de-siloed perspective from IT across infrastructure, application development, and support that identifies needs that we can do right away, things that we should do in the midterm, and things that we can hold off and do further out. The one thing to keep in mind here is that the tactics that we recommend, they need to be actionable as part of the roadmap, things that we can go off and create a track for and put a program together for. So these are the 5 considerations, and I wanted to talk for a minute about our approach, the Propelix approach to IT readiness, and how we've helped companies kind of keeping in mind the considerations. The 5 considerations are woven through this approach. It's a 3-step process. It starts with direction setting, and really everything that we do on the IT side for mobile, keep in mind, just to reiterate, I think it's critically important that you understand the needs of the business. You understand the envisioned mobile scenarios, and those envisioned mobile scenarios are dictated by internal factors like your corporate business drivers, but also by market forces and what opportunity is out there from a market perspective. What are our competitors doing? Where do we want to be as an organization? Once you understand the mobile scenarios, you move on to step 2, which is your assessment step, where you go through your technology maturity assessment, your risk profile from an app level and an infrastructure level, and you identify your mobile strategy and your standards and procedures that you need to put in place. And then that finally culminates in a 3rd step, which is recommendations, an IT roadmap, and a very, very tactical action plan. Sometimes we see our clients falling short on, they go as far as the roadmap, but they don't go as far as the action plan. And the action plan is really critical. That gives you a cadence around what are the different tracks, what resources do we need to get this going, what timelines does our IT team need to achieve the tactics within the roadmap, and really how it will be executed. The other important component here is around the who. Who's going to be owning this plan? Are we going to create a mobile center of excellence? Are we going to create a mobile, are we going to identify a mobile leader? Is this going to live, if we create a mobile COE, where will it live? Will it have business components? Will it be solely IT? Those types of decisions need to be made. So as Eric mentioned, I want to touch on an example, and we've done a number of these engagements. You can see some of the clients on the bottom of the screen there, but I pulled out the example of Family Dollar. And Family Dollar is a common case study that we see repeatedly, where the IT team knew that, they had heard anecdotally that there was business demand for mobile, that different groups had app ideas, but there really wasn't a consolidated mobile strategy yet. But IT had a lot of forethought, and they wanted to get ahead of the demand. So we started with the process that we just went through, and the first step was to go to the business, the different areas within the organization, and try to get a holistic understanding of the mobile demand, of the envisioned use cases across the various groups, from B2C to B2E to B2E2C, even some partner type apps. And we ended up identifying over 90 use cases just in our initial review. And we also found that not only was this review really useful for IT to understand what demand is out there and know that there's incredible demand for mobile, but it was also great for the business teams to get a sense of what the other, because the business teams were also operating in silos. So now they were able to understand what the other business units were looking to do, and they found that there were some use cases that were targeting the same end users. We also found that through this study, there was a high degree of business readiness, but IT was not at the readiness level yet, so there were some gaps. But we were able to build out a very actionable roadmap that focused on people, process, and technology. And from a people perspective, we recommended some IT organization changes and some additions of roles to support mobile. There were a number of processes that needed to be augmented and changed on the SDLC side. The gating process needs to be shortened to ensure that you're working at the pace of mobile. There were support changes, testing changes. There were a number of infrastructure and security augmentations that needed to take place. It was pretty eye-opening for the Family Dollar team that the SDLC process needed to be adjusted so much to account for the pace of mobile. On the technology side, there was a lot of work around reference architecture to support mobile, web services, and they quickly went down a journey right after this initial workshop on an MDM journey, as well as getting some of their core systems ready for mobile, and another journey to select a mobile cross-platform development tool. I think the most important thing here is that this was accomplished in 2 weeks. The whole process was run in 2 weeks, and it can seem the process can seem a little daunting, but if you have the right framework, it can be done. And we're really strong believers that the speed of innovation is critical. That IT cannot wait to create a roadmap to support your business's mobile strategy, because if you do, the business team is going to go off and hire vendors, kind of skirt IT, and get it done at the pace that they need it done. The other thing that we're seeing here is, you don't need the 6 months to sit down and devise your IT roadmap. It has to be quick. It has to be very actionable, very tactically focused, and something that is iterative, something that you can come back to. So that's all I have for you. Eric, I'm going to turn it over to you now. We can do some Q&A.
Sure. Yeah, we have a couple of questions from the Q&A spot, and also coming in off of the registration forms. Just wanted to also mention that many of the things that Adam talked about and Michael's preview to that are part of our IT Readiness for Mobile Kickstart. And we're also doing, clearly can do our advisory calls with one of our partners here at Propelix, with the Appcelerator team, to walk through some of this more information in detail and talk through some of the deliverables and the approach and other types of areas as well. Michael and Adam, there are a couple questions that came in from the groups previously, and one of the ones was related, coming from an IT perspective. They said, we're looking for new customers for mobile solutions, but how do we improve the demand from the customer's perspective? And I think we're talking about here from more an internal customer to IT versus an external customer, but how do we improve the demand in terms of being able to get them thinking the right way around mobility? Adam, you want to try that?
Yeah, absolutely. And then Michael alluded to this as well, and we have a very kind of similar thinking on this. But I think mobile actually is a great opportunity for IT folks to become innovators with the business, to take the lead instead of to be seen as order takers, really to be seen as the ones on the leading edge of mobile, to go out to the business, to help them through the art of the possible, of really, what is possible with mobile. A lot of times in a large enterprise, it's difficult to innovate. It's difficult to think beyond the current systems that we're using. And many times business folks don't even know, what's available to them, what apps are out there. They don't play around with technology as much as technology people play around with technology. And in some cases they do, but what we've seen generally, they might not be as much on the forefront. So IT has the opportunity to go around, take the lead in innovation, take the lead in running innovation sessions. Really still, I think business has to drive the ideas, but IT can bring the framework for the generation of those ideas. And if they bring the framework, they bring the approach, they start with the art of the possible, man, IT really starts to get looked at in a different light, and it can be really great. Mike, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'd agree with that, definitely. I think that the only other two things I'd add is, first and foremost, have a successful couple of applications, have some low-hanging fruit, right? So one of our clients, a very large travel company in Europe, launched a mobile application that is outbound, that's customer-facing, and it's just beautiful and gorgeous, and it's a massively successful app. It's the #1 travel app in Europe right now on the iTunes Store. That kind of success, all of a sudden, is going to get all the other business units thinking, wow, what can I do? How can I have that kind of success? And to your point, you know, if you're going around to all the business units saying, hey, guys, here are some really cool apps that either we've built or some really cool apps in the industry. Here are some things that we can do with existing business processes. Here are some possible things we can do. That sort of education and enablement is really going to drive the innovation from the business units. And, you know, just to repeat again, have a couple of low-hanging fruit, a couple of successful applications. That's going to be your best sales process, if you will. Were there some other questions that were coming in?
Oh, sorry, guys. Talking on mute there. We also have a few other questions and have some time to be able to take some more. So if you want to be able to use the QA bucket there, you can ask into that window. Dave also asked, will the deck be available and where can I get the guides you're displaying now? The deck will be available after this webinar completes, and if you drop back to propelix.com and go to this webinar page, the deck will be available to download right now. And the guides that are being displayed here are really our structure around our kickstarts, which are also available at propelix.com, and it walks through a little bit of the process and the deliverables associated to each of these types of areas. One other question that came in earlier before the webinar is really more from the business side of the house. We talked a little bit about this, but maybe Mike and Adam, some common challenges faced by enterprises in developing and successfully implementing a business mobility strategy. And so we talked a little bit around how to get IT going and being able to frame that up, but what are some of the challenges that the business teams are facing in thinking about this?
No, that's a great question. Adam, do you want to take first shot and I'll take second?
Yeah, sure. Let me go first. The one thing that I'd point to, Eric, on that question and encourage people to check out is the webinar we did a couple weeks ago on 7 considerations for your enterprise mobile strategy, and that focused on the business side. But really, you know, one of the biggest challenges, and I was alluding to this in the last question, is on how do you innovate? How do you come up with, how do you define mobile ideas that really move needles, that instead of just extending what you have today from an enterprise app perspective, that allow you to think differently about how you can use mobile to change the way you interact with customers, to change your customer behavior, to help your employees become more productive. Those are the types of scenario identification. Those types of scenarios are the ones that really you need to identify to really be successful with your mobile strategy. Otherwise, you're using mobile as simply another screen, as an extension of your apps, and the true value of mobile will come when you start to innovate with mobile and identify new use cases like that. Mike, you want to take it from there?
Yeah, I think the other side of it is, you know, the business has existing processes that they can mobilize, right? So there's everything from dispatch and routing to sales to transactional activities to other things like that they can mobilize. But the power of the mobile sort of strategy, or at least the frameworks that can be provided, is not necessarily in taking those existing processes and mobilizing them, but it's understanding what new processes and what new functions and capabilities can be enabled when you have information always at your fingertips, when you can you know, combine visits to a customer, when you can help that customer understand the breadth of your products. It's those new processes. I always point to something like a check cashing application on a mobile banking app. That wouldn't have existed if it wasn't for a mobile device with a mobile banking application and a camera on it. So it's those new sort of pie in the sky, non-considered applications and processes that should be enabled, and that's not something you can plan for, right? That's something you can only understand once a mobile app is sort of in the user's hands, and you're beginning to analyze a lot of the contextual information coming from that app, where they are, what they're doing, who they're talking to, how often they're talking to them, how fast they're going from point A to point B. It's only when you have those analytics can you really start to understand where are those mobile-first business processes and applications that exist.
Great. Thanks, guys. We had a good question come in from Martin. Martin asked, I have two business initiatives. One is leveraging our existing tools to the fullest and adopting a mobile strategy. My goal is to blend these by enabling our existing business tools and mobilizing them in the coming year. How do you recommend that we start?
Well, I think some of that depends on what those tools are, right? So if you're talking about sort of back-end data sources, I think the first is to securely connect those back-end data sources to a third tier, a cloud third tier or something like that, to enable you the flexibility to connect them to a bunch of different applications. Is that what we mean by tools, or?
Yeah, I believe it's more enterprise internal tools to say if we have existing tool sets for, say, SharePoint or for other types of things, how do we enable those and extend those, but also have a mobile strategy?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent. I mean, you've got some existing policies around security, governance, encryption. You've probably got regulatory standards you need to adhere to, like HIPAA or PCI or other things like that. So the first step is going to be taking those existing services and tools, SharePoint and other things like that, and providing a consistent, secure methodology to connect mobile applications. Now, a lot of times we use that cloud third tier to do the data orchestration, provide a REST-based interface for your mobile applications, or even APIs for those mobile apps. The next phase is to begin to experiment with the applications, and so utilizing frameworks and widgets and MVCs to provide consistent, not just methodologies of connections, but exposure and encryption, and then the sort of underlying infrastructure besides the mobile app platform and the mobile optimized connections to those services, but also that MDM and MAM capabilities, and Adam talked a little bit about that as well. Anything to add there, Adam?
Yeah, I would say that, you know, one thing to keep in mind, and hopefully this came through in the webinar, was, you know, I would not recommend just going ahead and mobilizing all of your tools and technologies that you have in place right now, especially if you don't go through the step first of understanding what the business wants to do with it. We've seen a lot of organizations do this, and frankly, the IT teams have kind of wasted some time, or they've gotten really ahead of themselves and tried to build web services and kind of an infrastructure for systems that the business doesn't really want to access, or maybe won't for a couple of years. The other thing that I would say on this point, and kind of goes to the last question as well, is that you don't necessarily think of when you're mobilizing tools, I would start to get away from direct connections to tools, or just thinking of point solution applications, like an application for CRM, a mobile application for business intelligence, a mobile application for ERP, and more think in terms of scenarios or a day in a life of what does our end user need to use to do their job. So in a sales call, you might need access to the CRM system, you might need access to some brochures that live in SharePoint, you might need access to order information or inventory in an inventory system. And mobile is really the perfect way from a usability front-end perspective to bring all these end systems together. So think of those scenarios. Think about scenarios, and B, from a tools perspective, think about how you can integrate various back-end tools in, you know, a great front-end, a great user experience for the people who need to use the apps.
Great. Thanks, Adam. And Mike, one last question before we wrap up. Scott asks, when you talk about moving at the speed of mobile, how are you seeing companies whose IT function does not have this skill acquiring it quickly?
That's a good question. Thanks, Scott. Yeah, this is a challenge. I mean, often it's a challenge to do anything quickly within large organizations, but it's a mixture of, I think it starts first with identifying what the gaps are. that has to be the absolute first thing that you do. And that's where we talked about the maturity assessment and the mobile report card, to know where your skills are, where they lie. Is it just going to be a tweak to current skills, or do you have to go out and find a whole new role, a whole new, new tools to achieve that? The second piece is not everything has to be done at the same time. You can order it. You can put some order around it. For instance, if you don't have any apps right away, even if you know that your support organization isn't ready, there might be some initial readiness things to do with support, but you'll want to start with adjusting your SDLC process so you can get going. With your application development. The third thing I would say is you can use a combination of internal and external folks. I mean, Propelix is brought in quite often to start off as a managed service for a mobile center of excellence, for instance, and then over time turn that over to the organization. So turn that over to our clients and train and bring our clients up to speed, so you don't have to do it all at once. And I would say that's becoming a more and more popular approach, because it is hard to do all the shift overnight and at the pace that you need to appease the demand of the business.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point too, because you're going to have some apps that you're going to want to bring in outside resources, and whether it's a customer-facing app and you want to bring in a super jazzy design firm, or you're going to have an employee-facing app that's accessing your SAP and you want to bring those SAP resources in. So I think that no matter what, you're going to use a mix of internal and external resources. Now, the tough part is, how do you get all those resources on the same page? And again, this is where a platform play really helps. If you've got a platform that has a huge ecosystem of developers, a huge ecosystem of third parties that can build those applications, or even parts of those applications for you, then that's a much more powerful methodology than saying, well, I've got this one platform for my SAP app, I've got another platform for my Oracle app, and a third platform, maybe native or something like that, for my customer-facing app. If you can sort of bring all those under the umbrella of a single platform, it's a lot easier for you to say, okay, great, I'm going to use this resource here to build it, but maybe I'll maintain it internally, and maybe I'll build that other app externally and maintain it internally, and move those apps in and out of maintenance and build phases relatively seamlessly.
Great. Guys, thank you so much for participating in this webinar. Adam and Michael, thank you for some great content here. This is a great July webinar. We look forward to seeing everyone on this call next month. If you haven't seen it so far, there's about 13 hours of this type of content related from everything from all these topics that were discussed today and even more at Propelix.com. With that, we'll close out the webinar, and the slides will be available today, and the recording of this as a movie will be around sometime tonight. Thank you very much.